Welcome to our 3:30 workshop, as it were. I'm going to call this meeting to order and see if there's anybody here for public testimony. And I'm getting the word that we do not have anyone for public testimony, so we will jump right in. Welcome, Greg. Thank you for joining us. He joins us from Northern California, but we won't hold that against you. Okay.
President.
So let's jump right into our conversation about monitoring. Oh, I'm sorry.
If we could just establish a quorum, then
we need to establish a quorum. Darn it. Okay. I thought I was going to jump right in. Mr. Real, will you take a roll call and establish a quorum, please?
Certainly. Trustee Lopez?
Present.
Vice President Otto? Here. President Craighead?
Here.
Member Benitez?
Here.
Member Miller? Okay, 4-1, you have a quorum.
Thank you. And now, Mr. Klein, I believe we're ready to jump into our calendar monitoring.
Thank you for having me. I grew up in Southern California. I was very excited to see Shohei pitch that one inning, so don't get it twisted. I have a lot of love for Southern California.
Well, we're happy to hear that.
I've not learned about that yet, but yeah. We'll talk about the Lakers another time. I grew up loving the Lakers, but it's been way too fun the last decade not to be a Warriors fan, so I'm definitely become a Warriors fan. Effective goal monitoring. Thanks for having me to talk about this conversation. I really enjoy getting to talk with governing teams and staff about this, because after setting goals, after setting those student outcome goals, effectively and regularly monitoring progress towards those goals is the next highest leverage tool that boards have to improve student outcomes. So this is like the main thing. Real quick, the training, sometimes these trainings, this will not happen today, don't worry, but these trainings can go 4 or 5 hours. There's a lot of content here because it's such an important skill for a board to get excellent at. We're just going to go for an hour. Don't worry, maybe even less. And whatever we don't cover, we'll just find more time and follow up. But I did want to share, just to anchor into the framework. You don't have to pull it out, but it's on page 4 under monitoring and accountability, under mastering student outcomes focus in the blue column, the column all the way on the right. The majority of the board's monitoring sessions during the period, during the last quarter, were rated effective or highly effective. So it's on the framework that we want our monitoring conversations. We want to monitor the quality of our monitoring conversations because they're such a powerful tool for improving student outcomes. So we want to make sure those conversations are effective or highly effective. The other thing I wanted to point out, in addition to the guidance document that was linked on the agenda, this guidance is actually also right in the manual. Starting on page, again, you don't have to pull it out, but starting on page 17, 18, and 19, there is training and reference material right in the manual around effective progress monitoring, in addition to what's here on that document that you all put on the agenda. All right, so to get started, we're going to have a few brief conversations. And so if you don't have it in front of you, pull out, the document says effective goal monitoring, and just take a minute, maybe I'll give you 2 minutes, and just read those first 2 little paragraphs. What is goal monitoring? Just read it to yourself. Just take a couple minutes, make sure you've read what is goal monitoring. All right. What is goal monitoring? Anybody can answer. It does not just have to be the board, but it is nice board when you lead. What is goal monitoring?
Goal monitoring is a way for the board to evaluate the alignment between the community's vision in the form of the goals and student performance or the reality of things.
Yeah. And how does it happen? In what form?
Between the board and the superintendent.
Yeah, it's between the board and the superintendent. It's a conversation between the board and the superintendent for the board to understand we know what the vision is of the community and where are we now in alignment with that. Have we made it there yet, or are we still not there? And if we're not there, are we making adequate progress? It's a conversation. It's a conversation. Take another minute. Before we move on, does anyone else want to share anything else about what is goal monitoring? Okay. I didn't want to move. I'm trying to keep it moving, but I don't want to cut anybody off. So take another minute. Just read the next section, those 4 bullet points. How is goal monitoring beneficial? Take a minute and read that section. All right. Who's got a benefit of goal monitoring? What are some of the benefits of goal monitoring? Why is it beneficial? How is it beneficial?
Well, I think in one way, it's a way for the board to communicate expectations by investing 50. Well, I know that's a goal of ours, a target of ours is to invest a good 50% of our meeting time to monitoring what students are able to do as far as what the goals are that we've set out. And that shows our priorities.
Mm-hmm. How the board spends its time definitely makes clear what the board's priorities are. What else? How else is it beneficial?
I was just going to add that I appreciate the lead by example, the way that we collectively talk about our data in a reflective way, grounded in the student outcomes, sets a tone for how our teachers and leaders feel comfortable reflecting even when there are bright spots and when there are challenges, that we're open to talking about it, and it allows that to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what happens at the boardroom with the governing team and staff absolutely gets paralleled right down through the organization all the way into classrooms. When we create psychological safety here for growth and reflection, that gets paralleled all the way down. When we don't do it here, well, then psychological safety is also not paralleled down. How else is monitoring beneficial?
I appreciate the clarify strategies, that it's not, if we're off track on the interim goals or the goals, it's not right or wrong, good or bad, but it's a matter of what are we going to do to get back on track. So it's an opportunity, really, a positive opportunity to say, what else might we do, or what do we need to do differently?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. This is a continuous improvement framework. You're gonna be a district for a long, long time, and you're gonna have lots of students coming through, and you're gonna have to constantly be learning about what it means to serve their needs. Continuous learning. Anybody else want to share how it's beneficial?
I would just build on Mr. Moskowitz's example. I think whether we say directly or indirectly, having clarity on strategies, like what strategies the superintendent is using to respond to the data, I think also helps the board think through our own conversations about our goals, right? So that clarity around strategy, yes, for the system, absolutely. But I think as board members, it's also helpful to know how our superintendent is responding to the data that we're being presented, that's being shared.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else want to share how monitoring is beneficial?
Well, there's ongoing conversations and allowing for adjustments to take place on the part of the superintendent, and allowing for us also to have those dialogues and discussions as to whether the kids are meeting the goals that we've set for them.
Yeah, thank you. So the rest of this document, after this intro section, kind of goes more in chronology. It's divided up by like what's the work before goal monitoring, what's the work during goal monitoring, and what's the work after goal monitoring. Okay, we're going to spend most of our time on the during goal monitoring piece. So I'm going to spend a little bit time on before. We're going to do before right now, and then I'm going to just touch on after at the very end. So I just want to let you know. So before goal monitoring, there are key ingredients, as the document says right there. What are some of the key ingredients that need to be in place before effective goal monitoring can occur? Yeah, you've got it. You're right. Where are you?
Sorry. The monitoring calendar, monitoring report, superintendent participation, and board member participation are the 4 key ingredients.
Awesome. Thank you. I know, and so we're going to look at monitoring calendar right now and the criteria for an effective monitoring calendar. I believe you all reviewed one earlier in June, and it's on your agenda for later tonight. Is that correct? There's one on for tonight. Yeah. All right. So, effective monitoring calendars. Well, let's just popcorn around. There's only 8, I think, of these bullet points here. Just popcorn around, read them out real quick as we go around. I'll read the first one to get us started. An effective monitoring calendar should span the entire length of the goals. If the goals are 5 years long, the calendar should also be 5 years long. And I'm looking at yours. Your goals go through June 28. Your calendar goes through June 28.
And actually, that monitoring calendar is building on a less effective monitoring calendar that we tried out, and then tonight's does go through the extent of, and maybe not less effective, but it is was less extensive.
Yeah. Yeah, so it continuous improvement. Thank you. Who will read next?
It should include all the board's goals and guardrails.
Great. So I'm looking at yours right now. You have 4 goals, right? I see 4 goals. You got 3 guardrails? Yeah, I see all 3. So it's got them all on there. Great. Checked off 2. Who will read next?
I'll read it. I'm just glad that we're going to get this new business tonight. We're going to get it figured out right now as we go through this. This is great. Third bullet. It often includes all board trainings, board-led community trainings, board-led community listenings, board self-evaluations, board-led superintendent evaluations, and statutory votes.
Okay. Notice this bullet point says it often includes. I don't see that on your calendar, and that's not a problem. I know of all these things, the board trainings, for example, we've been planning some of those in the implementation timelines. So those they're a little bit more, they've been more dynamic, I guess I could say, about how to get what's the right time for what training. So that could be hard to put on here. Board-led community trainings and board-led community listenings. I know the board is also discussing a community engagement plan. I think you already did earlier in June, and it's again on the agenda for tonight.
Yes.
Yeah. So when that gets adopted, if that's get adopted and this got adopted, you could create a version that had it all on the same one if you wanted. It doesn't have to be all on the same one. Board self-evaluations. As you get into that cadence, I think your next one is in July. So, you could choose to throw those on there. Those don't need special approval. They're just, every 3 months. And then some systems, it's helpful. They're like, whatever our statutory required votes, we got to approve our LCAP by this date or our budget by this date or whatever it is. Some boards have chosen to put those statutorily required votes on their monitoring calendar, but definitely not required, but just so you know. Who can read the next one? It should schedule.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead.
it should schedule each goal to be monitored at least 4 times throughout the year, and each guardrail at least 1 time per year on 12-month call.
Yeah.
Calendar.
Thank you. So this one, take a moment if you've got your calendar in front of you. When I did the math, the way I do this is I say, okay, I see goal 1, like the main goal, the head, the board goal in August. And then I see interim goal 1A and 1B in July. I see interim goal 1A again in November, interim goal 1B in December. So I'm seeing interim goals and goal 1. You're going to end up, if you follow this calendar, you're going to look at goal 1 at least 4 times. Okay? And if you keep doing that throughout them all, you'll see that you've got every goal at least 4 times. Some of them you have many more times than 4. And as you try that out, you may decide it's too much monitoring because the data isn't shifting, the strategies aren't shifting given that time period, and you might decide this is not a great use of time. In other cases, you might say that we're not monitoring some of these things closely enough. Yeah.
Greg, question, and let me know if we'll get to it later.
Yeah.
So our calendar is specific to interim goals. What is the correlation, if any, when we're getting the monitoring reports specific to the interim goals in relation to the broader goal?
Yeah, so you're going to get, according to this calendar, you're going to get the reports about the broader goals, the main goals, in August and September.
So my question is, so if and when we have the presentation of the interim goals, our conversations should really stay focused on that, given that we'll have the broader goal at a later time?
Yeah, or you will have already had the broader
Correct,
goal in the
correct.
past. Yeah,
Okay.
when you are in, just for example, in March, discussing interim goal 1A, you're talking about interim goal 1B.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Were you going to say?
If I could just add there, so remember, goal 1 and 2 are both about SBAC
Right.
results, and we only receive those once a year.
Right.
Goals 3 and 4 are primarily about grades, and we
Right.
only have 2 semester grades, and we really are talking end of year in particular for those. So that's why those only show up as the goal itself a couple of times. But the interim goals, as we bring them up, we should also be talking about how that's helping us point towards the larger goal itself as we're addressing the interims.
So I guess that was the question then, articulated much better by Brian, Greg.
Yeah, we're going to get into this in the next section,
Okay.
but when our coaching is when staff bring a monitoring report about interim 1B at the top, it does declare this is goal. What goal is this, and what's the latest status? Now that could be, depending on the calendar, the latest status is from 8 months ago because it's a once a year set of data. Yeah.
And back to Brian's point, so I know we're going to go through this, just big picture. If the assessments that we're using for interim goals are different than let's say the assessments that you pointed out, that's where, to me, it's again, okay, it may not be necessary or prudent for us to start talking about goals that we have to wait till the end of the year to get to, right, in the interim goal discussion. Am I way off here, Brian?
I don't know that you're way off, but I'm not totally sure. So our interpretation and our approach has been that we have established interim goals that we think are most closely correlated or highly correlated to the goal itself. And the theory of action is if we continue to monitor, not just in here, but all the way through our system, those interim goals, students are taking those assessments, teachers are acting on those assessments, principals are holding accountability, that if we do that, then when the SBAC, in this case, at the end of the year comes to be, we will have a high level of confidence that we will see growth based on what we've seen through the monitoring of the interim guardrails. That's our theory of action.
Yeah, it's very common that the goals are those lagging measures, those once a year or multi-year measures. And so boards don't want to wait. They don't want to wait, all that time to find out we were off track all that time. That's the role of the interim goals, or in the case of the guardrails, the interim guardrails. So you can have measures along the way. Are we, as we're climbing this mountaintop, have we made it to base camp 1? Have we made it to base camp 2? Have we made it to base camp 3? Those interim measures. And yeah, Brian's absolutely right. You want your staff picking interim measures that are going to, when you accomplish those interims, you're very likely to be on track for accomplishing the goal that you all set.
Just adding to that, something that we talked about last meeting that actually was illuminated in today's principal meetings. So there's the not having district goals that are separate now from the interim goals. And so principals were introduced to a tool that reflects the board goals and the interim goals and will be populated with their specific school data so that they actually are tracking the same way that we are tracking in the boardroom around their ability to work with their teams to meet the goals. So up the system, from boardroom to classroom, from classroom to boardroom.
This could be semantics. Dr. Baker, thank you for sharing that. That's a little nuanced for me because when we're getting interim goal monitoring reports, they're not the same as getting end of the year SBAC. There's a rationale to why we're using whatever other measurements we're using. So when I read, it's semantics here. Goals will be monitored 4 times a year.
Oh, I understand.
Right?
I understand. Let me, thank you. Yeah, definitely take this up with AJ. So what we mean by that, traditionally, what the interpretation of this is the big goal, the main goal once a year, and say you've got 3 interims. If you do each interim at least once, that's 4. That's how it works. Oftentimes, a system will look at the board goal, the main goal, once a year, and each interim, maybe there are 3 interims, and they look at each interim 2 times or 3 times, and then you might end up monitoring a goal 7 or 8 times. Yeah. Okay. Interim guardrails are treated differently, just to be clear. It's hard to monitor a not smart guardrail, right? So the way you monitor is through the interims, and the coaching there is to make sure you're monitoring each interim guardrail at least once a year. At least once a year. And I believe I see all the interims on there at least once in the year. Okay. I think we were on the third from the last. Who can read the next one? It can schedule as many.
I'll read. It can schedule as many interim guardrails to be monitored during a month as the board wants.
Yeah. So as many interim guardrails as you want to monitor a month, you can. Oh, maybe I missed one. I'm sorry. Yeah, the one above that was it should schedule 1 or 2 interim goals to be monitored each month, no less, and definitely no more than 3. So I see there's 3 in some places. In some places I see only 1. And in some places I see none, but those are when you're monitoring the high-level goals. This is the tension between the calendaring and reality, is that staff is working hard to figure out, well, when is this data created by students? And you have to kind of thread the needle between the time it takes for staff to put reports together and for the assessment windows to end, and for the data to not be too stale, where it's not really an effective time to have the conversation, like the ship has sailed. So you see staff just on the nature of reality in Long Beach, making choices, but in general, it's still following the guidance. And then the last 2, just want to be clear that goal monitoring is never done via consent. Goal monitoring is never done via consent. This is where our coaching would say, we want you to use your time in board meetings to have the conversation with the board, with the superintendent, and as needed with support staff for sure. Guardrail monitoring, if you are monitoring your guardrails, regularly, sometimes boards will say, oh, we're on track for that one. We've already discussed it. Guardrail monitoring, those interims, those can be placed on consent. Okay, so I just want to let you all know you have that option. And then when the board approves it via consent, the board is acknowledging, okay, we accept the report. Any questions about what can go on consent or not go on consent? And then the last one is just that the calendar should clarify that boards will monitor goals during every month of the year that the board meets. And I believe I see you meet 12 months a year, you've got monitoring all year. I've heard AJ say the board should monitor goals every month that it cares about children. Right? So there you go. So you all will take this item up later, but I just wanted to run through this is really obviously created by staff because staff know as I said, when our assessment's made and or the data is made and how long it'll take reports to be made and all that sort of stuff. But it is the board's to still approve because we want to make sure everyone is on the same page. Because now you'll know in February of 2027 what monitoring reports you are going to get. Okay? Any questions on effective monitoring calendars before we move on?
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
If staff would like to present something else, let's say to a month where we only have one or two, does that require approval from the board, or can they just schedule that?
If they want to bring an additional monitoring report, that's a new one for me. If staff want to bring in an additional monitoring report,
And what I'm thinking of is what we did, I want to say it was May, where board members went out to schools to hear directly from the students. So if it's something of that nature, but it goes towards monitoring, can staff bring that forward without a board approval?
I think so, but I also want to just share that you could, in April of 2026, go out to the sites to support your monitoring of interim goal 4A. Like without any, the when you went out to the sites, that was a way that you monitored. It didn't change what you were monitoring. You still monitored per your calendar from this fiscal year that ended. The calendar just declares the topic. It's not doesn't hamstring you for your method.
I also think, and we have not yet shifted to a new way of bringing in monitoring reports. So what I think you're referencing is kind of what we have done traditionally, where staff sits at the table and shares slide decks, and we talk about the data. So as we enter into a new way of providing monitoring reports to the board for discussion, it will include things like the data. It will also include analysis, strategies we're up to. It may include voices from the field in that report. So I know we're holding on to kind of what has been the current version of monitoring report, and just know that we are working on and we'll bring to you for just for review in the near future what new monitoring reports might look like that could include both qualitative and quantitative.
I like hearing that because the innovative way that we went out into the field and heard directly from the students, I felt was very valuable. And the topic was algebra, and so we were very pointed in our questions. We heard from diverse students. Anyhow, I won't say more about that, but it's just nice to know that we have that freedom, to allow our staff to present things to us in different ways. Absolutely.
I thought it was pretty awesome when you all went out in the field and monitored out there. It was great. I had a great fun sharing that with my coach colleagues, for sure.
Diana, I thought what you were asking, so thanks for clarifying that, was let's take the month of November where we have interim goal 1A, whether if staff wanted to bring, for whatever reason, interim goal 1B in November as well, and we wouldn't have it in December, would it need board approval because we have it this way scheduled, or whether staff could just say, hey, we're looking at the preliminary data, we feel it's important for you to get a sense of 1A and 1B in December for whatever the reason, right? Yeah. Assessment dates change, whatever that is, whether we needed to come back to the board in order for that to happen, or whether there was some discretion. I thought that's what you were going with your question, Anna.
Yeah, and I don't think we have strong coaching either way on that. If you all can quickly, get to consensus and just move it forward and everyone's clear, the consequence of moving it forward is potentially if the public doesn't have as much time, but pushing things back if someone gets sick and the report can't get made on time or something like that. I think you'll just navigate things. Yeah. And if you decide that no, we want to, take a formal action, by all means, put it on agenda and take formal action. Yeah. So the next section does go into effective monitoring reports. We have a little bit of guidance and coaching there. This is mostly for staff, so I'm not going to go too deep into it. But board members, when you get a monitoring report, it should have these 4 things, those bold words: the goal, the data, the interpretation, the evidence, and the plan. So a monitoring report should have those things. So you should know, okay, this is goal 1, 2, 3, or 4. And then additionally, if it's an interim, you should know exactly which interim we're talking about. The goal. The data, it should definitely show you what's the current reality, where did we expect to be at this moment in time, what did the previous sets of data look like for this. So just the data. The interpretation. This is the superintendent needs to tell you, we are at the goal or the interim goal. We are not at the goal. We are on track. We are not on track. You need to hear from your superintendent about their understanding of the level of performance. And then finally, depending on what the data shows, you need an evidence and a plan. The plan may be, hey, we're on track. We're going to keep it going. And this is what that looks like. Or we're not on track and we are going to shift these things and do things differently for, whatever it is. And part of what you'll do in your monitoring is get a sense of, because as we said at the beginning, you're trying to understand, the vision, the aspiration, what is the current reality? If that is a huge gulf, a huge gap, and you're not making progress, then you're going to want to hear from your superintendent about the urgent and larger shifts that the system is contemplating, right? If your vision for this goal is here and reality is here and it's we were flat a little bit, but we're pretty close, you might expect, shifts still from your superintendent, but maybe more nuanced ones, right? So you need to have the data will help you understand whether or not the plan is sufficient. The next part is around effective superintendent participation. I just wanted to share, don't hide the data. Don't hide the data. Definitely don't hide the data. Don't sugarcoat the data. You want to be clear about how we're aligning this monitoring to the action steps that we're planning on taking and what's going to be different. This might also be a big shift for Long Beach, so it might take time. You might come to some agreements about which interim goals at first, like you really hear more directly from the superintendent and where you expect staff to step up and lead. But we want in our coaching, we definitely want the superintendent to be as facile as possible with this data. I mean, it's a huge organization, and so it's hard to have at your fingertips all the information. But we do coach. Superintendents will have practice monitoring sessions with their cabinet throwing questions at the soup to help prepare and be ready to be the person engaging in the monitoring. And doing that across all the interims at the beginning it's a lot of work. And so you might just start to choose 1 or 2 where the superintendent starts to really make sure they're the one helping answer the board's questions first. Even when that happens, though, expect the superintendent to bring in colleagues who are even closer to those specific interims and the initiatives underneath them. And then moving on to board member participation, and this is much more fun. The monitoring is hard. You're going to have homework. You're going to have, you're going to get these reports in advance. You're going to have to read them and try and understand them. And your main tool that you have is asking questions. So that's what I want to spend some time on, is asking questions. In our coaching, there are 3 kinds of questions, and obviously there's many more, but there's 3 kinds: technical, tactical, and strategic. If it's not in there, it links. This document links to that document that explains about the 3 kinds of questions. There are no bad questions, to be crystal clear. There are no bad questions, and board members can ask whatever questions they want. Whatever questions they want. So be very clear. There's no limits on the questions. Our coaching, though, is that board members should ask strategic questions as much as possible during monitoring, and as much as possible get their technical questions and tactical questions answered ahead of time, earlier, coming into monitoring, already having those questions answered. So quick example, technical questions are things like, how does this assessment correlate to that assessment? Or, how do we know this interim is predictive of that one? A tactical question would be, how do teachers get trained on administering this assessment? And how many students take it? And when do they take it? And things like that. They're all perfectly good questions and valid questions, and we want you to ask them and get them answered. Our coaching is simply try and get that done earlier, like if you have a Q&A process or something, so you can come into board monitoring and ask your strategic questions. And that's what we're going to practice here in a moment. Just to be crystal clear, it's also helpful for your superintendent if you ask your strategic questions ahead of time as well. And your superintendent may have time to prepare answers and also send answers ahead of time, but don't let that stop you from asking your strategic questions again. Okay? There's still value in having the oral conversation around the strategic questions and responses. Okay. So I went really fast on technical, tactical, and strategic. None of them are bad questions, but we're going to focus now on the strategic ones. And so do folks have a draft monitoring report or an old monitoring report or anything in front of them, or no?
If they brought them from a previous meeting.
Okay.
However, I think what could be confusing about that is that doesn't represent the new
The
version
way we're
of a
moving
monitoring
forward.
report. So
Yeah.
mostly what we have used are slides that reflect the data without analysis, without recommendations, without the context and narrative that goes with it. So it would be a different thing to look at anyway.
Okay, no problem. So remember how I said that this work and this training, comes right out of the framework around rating. The majority of the board's monitoring sessions are rated effective or highly effective. So we have a tool for that. Okay, we have 3 main tools to help a board increase their focus on improving student outcomes. One is the self-evaluation tool. The other is the time use tool that Trustee Benitez has been helping us with. And then now we're talking about this effective monitoring tool. It's just a simple Google spreadsheet. And the way it works is whoever's monitoring the monitoring, and again, I recommend that you'll rotate this role. And you don't have to do it every single monitoring conversation, but in the beginning, I recommend more reps, more practice. You'll get stronger even faster. And you scribe the questions that board members ask. That's as simple as that. You write them all down, and then we rate them. I don't have a way to project, I don't think, anything real that easily. So what I want to do is, anyone want to make up a question real quick about a fake data set or something you've got?
Dr. Baker, for board goal 3, we saw a 48% growth with the last assessment. To what do we what can we attribute this tremendous growth in that goal?
Thank you. Appreciate it. I didn't get it exactly. So for this board goal, we saw this growth, and to what can we contribute this goal? So the way monitoring works is we go through and we have, just like with the interim goals and the interim guardrails and the goals, we talked how they were SMART. We have a version of SMART for how smart our questions are. So the S is, are they strategic? The M is, are they measurable, or are they about a specific measure on the report? So, I heard board member Benitez say, for board goal 3 or 4, he referenced the specific one. The A is it ask oriented? Is it a yes/no question, or is it an open-ended question? And we would definitely encourage open-ended questions, right? So to what can we contribute, right? And then that gives the superintendent the opportunity to share, not just yes or no. Results focus is the real fun one, okay? This is where we're basically trying to get a determination of, is this a question that is masquerading as an opinion? Okay, is this the board member going on and on and on, just talking more and more because really they have an opinion about what should have happened or what didn't happen or what could have happened, as opposed to actually trying to understand the data and just what is the data sharing? Okay, so that's what the R is for, and then the T is time bound. And when we're talking about monitoring, we're really trying to have most of that monitoring conversation about the past, replaying the video about what occurred in the past. If I don't understand how I even got here, then I don't want to be thinking about, well, now am I going to turn left or am I going to turn right on the rest of my journey? Like, so most of a monitoring conversation, you know, if you think about the minutes, like 80% of the minutes of a monitoring conversation, you want to be focused on questions about what occurred, right? And I heard that in this example question, you know, to what did we do in the past that contributed to the tremendous growth that we're seeing in this data, okay? It is very common and totally appropriate near the end of a monitoring conversation for board members. The questions are, so what comes next, right? Like so now we've got a good sense of how we got here. You know, board members will still have questions and that's perfectly acceptable. But I just that's how we think about time boundness. And so I'm hoping, like I said, this is usually a 4-hour training. We usually have time to go through and we write questions and we write bad questions and then we score them. And so what I'm hoping is following this training, you know, someone will volunteer to start tracking the effectiveness of monitoring. And I'm not sure, you're not monitoring anything till July, right? If the calendar were to be adopted, you'd be monitoring stuff in July. Yeah. So between now and then, what I would say is I would ask to meet with a board member one-on-one, and we would go into deeper training, just one-on-one about how we use the tool to score the questions. And in the beginning, I've as I said, I think I said in a past board meeting, I've scored some of your monitoring sessions going back, and they were already at the effective level. So you come in as a board to this conversation with a lot of skill, which is why I felt comfortable coming in today and just having an hour kind of refresher. And then just starting, the only practice I really want to help y'all build is not just getting good at asking the questions, but building the skill of monitoring the board's questions and calibrating. It's something we do as coaches all the time. We watch board meetings, and I'll say, well, I don't know, was that a strategic focus question or not? And I'll get with another coach and make them watch it, and we'll argue about it. But it's just a muscle that we build. So any questions? Questions about questions. Yeah.
So Greg, just to confirm, it's that practical where someone's just literally looking back at the video or taking some notes while the meeting's going on, listing out all the questions that were asked during monitoring, and then evaluating those questions?
Yeah, and the spreadsheet simply says, you know, for each question, it's yes, no. It's just yes, no on those criteria. Is it strategy focused? Yes, no. Is it measure focused? Did it reference, you know, the report and a measurement? Yes, no. Is it ask oriented? Yes, no, or open ended? You know, which is it? And you just go through it, and then it scores the question because it's 5 categories. Each question is 0%, 20%, 40%, 60%, 80%, or 100%. And across all the questions, you get an overall percentage. And we're looking for 80% or more overall. 80% is effective, 90% is highly effective. Great.
And then what do we and or you and us do with the assessment that's done every time we have a monitoring report?
Yeah, so you just know, one, you can just share. You can share out and have a conversation. Hey, according to the questions we asked, I'm rating this conversation at an 84%, which would makes it an effective monitoring conversation. And you're going to need to understand how well your monitoring conversations are, because one day you're going to be you're going to try and get into that column, and you're going to want to know that the majority of your monitoring sessions are rated effective or highly effective. Yeah.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
In this process, should we expect to receive data that is disaggregated by student groups?
If that's what the goal or interim goal calls for, yes. Other questions?
Yeah. Besides the meetings, how will we communicate the progress to our stakeholders?
Thank you for that question. Absolutely, it is the job of the board to communicate progress to the community, 100%. Part of that can be what you all are discussing later tonight around that ongoing community engagement plan. I've shared in the past that there are multiple reasons why you all need a community engagement plan. One is you need to be constantly listening for the vision and the values of the community so that you know, is the community expressing ownership of the goals and the guardrails? Are we aiming for the right things? Are we protecting the right values? Right. So that's one thing. The other reason is to be out in community, sharing back. Hey, these were our goals and guardrails that you helped us develop. Here's where we're at towards them. This is that's another purpose of going out as part of the community engagement. The third one is going out and training people in the model. Hey, why even have goals and guardrails? And what's the purpose of monitoring? And why are we tracking our use of time? How does that help us? And so that way community just starts to build their understanding of why you've chosen to take on this work. So absolutely. And so if that's not robust enough in the plan you're currently considering for later tonight, the community engagement plan I know you all been working on, just know that our coaching there is it's okay to get started. And then as you get out there and you're listening and you're doing the work, come back and share what you're learning with your colleagues, and you can make adjustments to your engagement plans.
Greg, alongside that, not mutually exclusive of the three things that you shared, in addition to us obviously presenting and having a conversation during board meetings, I know that Brian and Dr. Madrigal have been spending a lot of time and energy also making the monitoring reports accessible and understandable, so that if they are either not able to watch one of our board meetings or for whatever reason not able to attend one of the spaces or meetings as part of our community engagement plan, that community should be able to pull this up off of our website or whatever, and that it is accessible and presented in a way that would be understandable, so that there also isn't, I guess, two things going on. One is an over-reliance on, I wasn't able to make that meeting, so I'm not going to know, what's going on, but that it doesn't require, for lack of a better word, an explainer, for the
Correct.
information.
Absolutely. Our frame on that actually is that all of school board governance should be done at that level. School board you should require no special degrees or training, like prior to. I misspoke there. We definitely want board member candidates. We would want people to have access to training beforehand, but there's no prerequisites to getting that training. This is just regular folk taking their turn serving as an elected representative. And so absolutely, if your community, find the average reading level out there, and, your report should be at that level. It is jargon-free, clean reports. I think on the top of page 2, no more than 5 pages. And that includes, the charts, that take up a good amount of the space. This is not going on and on and on. And because what happens when you do that, you hide things. So that is definitely not the coach.
Have you experienced in your coaching tools, for example, like a voiceover set of slides that our communications team might develop to share on our website, or for board members to have in their community engagement sessions and things like that that are supportive?
Absolutely would be supportive. I've heard of one system, I don't coach with them, and their monitoring reports, that's the 5-page report, 1 to 5 page report. Sometimes the monitoring report is 3 pages. It doesn't have to be all 5. And staff take the time to, instead of coming and sitting here and using the time to just go through the reports, they create a little YouTube video or, a video of themselves going through the slideshow with their little face, popped up over it, just narrating the information briefly. It gets posted along with the agendas and the materials. The board gets it, in advance. So everyone has the presentation and access to the presentation, ahead of time. And then you can come in and you can just say, board, what are your questions? How would you like, you can just start. That will help you with shrinking your meeting time. It won't improve your percentage of meeting minutes, but it does just give people access to the information. But I'll just share, this is not your board meetings are insufficient to keep the community up to date with your progress. Like your full community is not participating or listening to your board meetings. And so your instincts, I want to encourage your instincts that it's not enough. You have to go out to community, and that's what I know you're planning on doing, for sure.
And I think about listening to the conversation about a community engagement plan and what parts of that engagement might be consistent across all of the sessions, regardless of where you are in the district, who's doing the presentation, that might be supportive of having an update on goals and guardrails that is used as a video, and then there's engagement specifically by, if there are two board members hosting something, like, I can just see a variety of ways to support that as staff.
So real quick on community engagement, consistency is definitely our coaching. Does not mean robotic. Does not mean you all have to, say the exact same words, but consistency. You don't want members of, one community or geography over here feeling like they were treated differently than, someone else over there. So our coach, so when we talk about having talking points or a script, it's not to hem people in. It's just to make sure the community experiences, things in common. For those meetings and those monitoring reports, I would recommend, if you want to put together a slideshow or video, it's the board members' voices that are coming through, and they're the ones sharing the data. Staff, I'm sure, would be very helpful with like the technical production side of that. But I would say you don't want to put anyone between the board and the community.
And Dr. Baker, as you're saying this, I'm thinking, because it's 5 of us, right? And there's a finite, number of days in our respective calendars. I'm thinking like the 45 Sankofa meetings that we now have across the district, that if we had a video or the slideshow, whatever, with one or more of us, that even though we can't physically be at all DCACs, DLACs, ELACs, CAC meetings, it doesn't replace or take the place of all those spaces that we certainly want to be in, but at least there's consistency in what information is being distributed. And then again, the feedback loops would be, well, even though I wasn't at that meeting, I saw the video, I can be at this other meeting and, ask questions or provide responses.
There are ways also to provide a link for feedback, a QR code for feedback that goes to the board relative to that kind of presentation. So I'm just trying to think of different ways to utilize. We have an amazing communications team, an amazing team that knows how to interact in ways that are future facing, not old school. And so just want to benefit from their work.
Yeah, and
too.
it is a lot of work to get out, and you only have so many days on your calendar, and so think about, as you're organizing your community engagements, can you accomplish in, I think 90-minute session, can you accomplish more than one purpose in a community engagement? Can you both have a long chunk of it where you're listening, right? You're stepped back and have been quiet so you can hear from community. But maybe it is framed up at the beginning with, well, before we get started, I want to give you an update on where we're at on the goals and guardrails, right? And at the end, a brief something about training or something, and maybe that's too much, but for any one session. But you can be thinking about, for what purpose are you trying to do community engagement, and it's okay to schedule 2 in 1 if you think you have enough time. I definitely want to end on time, which my understanding was 4:30. So in our last couple of minutes, I do want to talk about after goal monitoring. So we talked about before goal monitoring, you need those 4 ingredients. During goal monitoring is really about the strategic questions. No bad questions, but we want to emphasize the strategic ones during the monitoring conversations.
Greg, I got to say this. You and AJ are funny. You're
Yeah.
saying there's no bad questions, but you're saying they're ineffective.
Hey, I'm just not here to say board members can ask what they're going to ask. I'm not going to tell a board member they can't ask a question. That's all I'm saying. I'm also not pretending that all questions are the same. Some are more effective and aligned to research that helps improve student outcomes, and some are not. It doesn't mean they're good or bad. And sometimes, if I'm a board member, I need some of that background technical and tactical information so I can even understand enough and have the context so I can ask my strategic questions. That we're just saying, try and get that work done before the board meeting. That's all. Yeah. So after goal monitoring, the board has work to do. You need to decide if the current reality matches the vision. Like, did we get to the mountaintop? Okay. If you did, our coaching is you should accept the monitoring report. If you actually have accomplished the interim or you've accomplished the goal and you're there, our coaching is you should accept the monitoring report. Chances are, particularly early in the process, you might not yet have accomplished all the way, right? Maybe you've made progress, maybe you haven't made progress, but you haven't gotten all the way there. that can happen. Then you can still accept the monitoring report if the superintendent has convinced you that those shifts or the plan, I should say, is sufficient, and that you believe, okay, now we're going to see the shifts at the next monitoring or the future monitoring reports. Okay, and in that case, if there's evidence and a plan, you can accept the monitoring report. That's our coaching. Okay, and that is generally, in most places, that's what you tend to see the most. You're just like, oh, we're still not quite there yet, but I've been convinced of the shifts and the changes. If you're not convinced as a board, if you're not convinced that the superintendent has a sufficient plan, you can vote to not accept the monitoring report. And that is a signal that the superintendent needs to go back and do more work and bring it back to you. It's not that the conversation is over, okay? It's just that that's how you signal, like, this gap is getting bigger and we wanted it to shrink, and I'm not seeing how much. I'm seeing we're going to keep just doing all the same things. If you decide that's not sufficient, when you don't accept a monitoring report, you're not signaling to the superintendent it's over. You're signaling, please go back and bring us a more robust, urgent plan. Any questions on this idea of accepting or not accepting? What would you actually formally have to do to accept or not accept a report?
Well, that was going to be my question to you. Is it a formal vote?
Yeah, so monitoring reports are action items in our coaching. Some boards choose to sleep on it for a moment and bring it back on consent at like a later meeting, and they take action through. So that would be, and I don't want to be confusing, because we said goal reports are never on consent, but if you wanted to approve it at the back end, you could do that. But most boards, right in that moment, at the end of the monitoring, they say, okay, anyone have any more questions? No? Okay, is there a motion on the floor? Does someone want to make a motion to accept or not accept this monitoring report? Okay, is that, yeah.
Yeah, no, I didn't realize it was a formal vote. I think we're all taking note of that.
Yeah.
And we'll be prepared.
So Diana, regarding your question, and I'm hopeful and excited that we will accept if it meets the three criteria, the monitoring reports. If there is a circumstance where we vote not to accept, do we just move on to the next monitoring report, or what happens at that point?
Oh, sure.
To address the not voting to accept the monitoring report?
Yeah, ideally in the conversation, it will be clear, and the superintendent will have, next steps and things that they want to do. I think in terms of your board meeting agenda that night, if you have more monitoring to do, yeah, you're moving on to the next conversation, whatever is the next item on the agenda. You're not expecting your superintendent to change the report right then and there in the moment. They're going to have to go back, and they'll bring it back to you probably at some future, maybe it might be 2 weeks later, might be a month later, but they'll need to address it, and you'll just put it right back on your calendar, and in which case you'd be monitoring it again briefly off calendar, but just to be clear, and that would be okay.
So it doesn't push back the other monitoring that's
No.
expected to take place
No,
next?
it does not. Yeah. Okay, I think we're at time. There's as I said, there's definitely a lot more. I'll be following up with the board, just asking for a volunteer on who wants to learn more about monitoring. And then as we do that, the idea was that I would train one of you, and then as you got good at it, you could train the next person and train the next person. But thanks very much for having me. I'm going to be here for your evening session as well. Thanks.
Thank you very much for leading us in this discussion. I know it's a learning process for us, and like you said, a muscle we need to develop, and that's what we're doing. So thank you, and we'll see you in a little bit. So thank you, everyone. We'll adjourn this part of our meeting and reconvene for our 5 o'clock meeting at 5 o'clock. Thank you.